happy Wednesday evening, everyone. It is good to see everyone's faces. I'm going to do my best to keep everyone, muted and unmuted at the appropriate time and everything else. I will say now, and we may say this again towards the end, that we are officially now at the next transition period. So we don't know when it will mean we can do something not like this, but we're starting to think about that, and we are starting to think seriously about not just the slow transition back into the building in some ways, but not always, and how many and how much and for what and all of those things, but also thinking very critically about what the next year is like, because this is a transition that when we went to TAS online, that was like a light switch. We were like not really online at all, and then we were completely online immediately. The transition back will be much, much slower, and we're not talking about weeks, we're talking about months. And that'll be with eyes and ears open, and that's all I can even say right now is that we are officially in the transition period. So you may not see a difference in how we are doing things. You definitely won't this week or next week, but you may not even see that in the month of May, but that doesn't mean that we're not thinking about how we're going to be moving back in the building, both for business, which will probably happen first, and for community stuff. So we're all on this journey together, and we want to all be a part of it together. Now, we have a very special guest this week, just like every week. Every guest is a very special guest at Temple Avodat Shalom, the temple of special guests. But I'm very excited about tonight's, which it's not a secret. It's through Teichholz, who is waving his hand right now. And both of us forgot to wear a bow tie when we spoke on the phone, because Lou wears bow ties. I was like, I'll wear a bow tie of solidarity, and here we are. This is what we have come to in the COVID-19 crisis. People who normally wear bow ties are just a collared shirt, and you know what? The world might as well be ending. So I had a very fun conversation this morning, Lou, with Cantor, because I was like, I want to open with something musical, and I'm curious to see which side she landed on the debate we were having, because the debate went like this: do we do some healing music in honor of your medical career and impact and teaching, or do we do some Hasidic melodies in honor of one of your most interesting Jewish medical stories? So I'm going to pass it over to Cantor and see if it came out on that divide.
And both would be completely appropriate, right?
Yes.
And honestly, both have healing qualities, because every Hasidic nigun is a healing melody. But I chose to bring something actually healing, a song that is called "Heal Us Now" by Leon Shear. And we usually don't sing it in our congregation, but it's very nice. And I'm thinking about everything that Yulu bring to us, and all of the doctors, all of the medical, people who work in medical field. But I also think about the strengths of each of us. Each of us has the strength to actually bring this healing to ourselves by contemplating and praying. And this is really a prayer, and it starts with the Hebrew part, which I probably will omit, but I will go to the English part straight. And if you're on mute, if you can repeat after me, because I'll teach you a little bit of this. Heal us now. Repeat after me. Heal us now. Heal us now. Heal us now. So every time I will be singing Heal Us Now, you will be repeating after me. And you can also sing with me. Oh, please heal us now. You can sing with me this part, but definitely sing Heal Us Now. Okay, let's try that. We pray for healing of the body. We pray for healing of the soul, for strength of flesh and mind and spirit. We pray to once again be whole and now. Oh, please heal us now. רפואת הנפש, רפואת הגוף, רפואה שלמה. Repeat after me. Heal us now. Heal us now. Heal us now. And let's try a little more. We pray for healing of our people. We pray for healing of the land and peace for every race and nation, every child, every woman, every man. Oh, please heal us now. רפואת הנפש, רפואת הגוף, רפואה שלמה. Repeat after me. Heal us now. Heal us now. Heal us now. Heal us now.
Thank you, Cantor. And I totally forgot to say it before we started, and I didn't want to interrupt the beauty of the melody and the power of the prayer for healing, but I threw the lyrics in the chat box, which is always a place to keep your eye on whenever we are Zooming together. And I wanted to actually pick up on, as a way of transition, so Cantor mentioned that in Hasidic Judaism, nigunim are generally considered healing. And that's just a fascinating concept, because that's saying that music is healing even without any words of healing attached. Now, heal us now, and then using the Hebrew text from where Moses is praying to God to heal Miriam, who was punished with an illness. That is a healing melody with a healing text, but just yai lai lai, bitty bitty bem bom doesn't necessarily seem healing centric, but to segue into interviewing about Dr. Teichholz and his work with the Rebbe, as in Rebbe Schneerson, just a quick note about what Hasidic Judaism really is outside of the sometimes hard to see past ultra-Orthodox veneer that it often comes under. Most of the tradition that we would call Orthodox Judaism, for most of that history was something called mitnagdim. And mitnagdim Orthodox Judaism was, it had more of an emphasis on learning and following the halacha and the process of expanding and interpreting halacha and doing all of that correctly and study. And, that was the major emphasis. And what the Baal Shem Tov did is he started another version of what we might call Orthodoxy that came to be called Hasidic Judaism. And it was intended as an alternative approach to Orthodox Judaism from this mitnagdim tradition. So mitnagdim is everything that I was just saying. And then the Hasidic Jews said, you know what? You don't need to know the entire Talmud section about the Shema in order to pray the Shema correctly. And you don't have to be in the fanciest seat in the fanciest synagogue in order to connect spiritually with God. And they went out of the synagogues and into nature and started praying without words which is what that Nigunim tradition comes from. And it may seem a little weird to us now who, when we see ultra-Orthodox, we think of such an unflexible form of Judaism, but at its origin, Hasidic Judaism was a completely alternative approach to religious orthodoxy. And that tradition is still there in the various streams and sects within ultra-Orthodox Judaism that are in the broader sect, the broader umbrella of Hasidic Judaism. And so I'm gonna go ahead and play a video interview to get this started. This is an interview done with Lou about his work being the Rebbes cardiologist. So I'm gonna put everyone on mute for this, and hopefully all of my tech sharing stuff will work.
Dr. Louis Teichholz is a leading cardiologist. In 1977, he was a head of cardiology at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York.
I got a call from Dr. Ira Weiss, who had been one of my students at Harvard, who said that the Rebbe had a heart attack. So I was taken to the bedside of the Rebbe down Flatbush Avenue, 60 miles an hour, the wrong way with a police escort. When we got to 770 on the street was full of Hasidic men in their black coats and black hats, and literally, as the police came, it parted like Moses parted the Dead Sea. It parted, and I was rushed in. Someone took off their hat and gave me a yarmulke, and I was rushed in to see the Rebbe. Interestingly enough, despite the heart attack, he was alert and full mental capacity. I reviewed all the medical data, examined him. I told him, as a physician, that he needed to go to a hospital. He asked me, why go to the hospital? And I said, you need to be in a coronary care unit. And I explained all the monitoring equipment, the equipment to treat problems if they occurred. And 2 hours later, they built a coronary care unit at 770. And we took care of him at 770. Dr. Weiss flew in. Dr. Resnick was flown in from Hawaii. And we formed a group of physicians. And for 5 weeks, he was in 770. That was his hospital. That was his coronary care unit. And he did extremely well. And at that point, I started to have a lot of discussions with him. The Rebbe was very knowledgeable about many things, including medicine. And I learned a lot from him. And a lot of our views were the same, that you have to heal the mind as well as the body, and that the role of the physician was to heal. God gave us the right and authority to heal, but that the patient had to also participate. Perhaps the most interesting thing was our early discussions on preventive medicine. I think he was ahead of his time in terms of understanding the real role of preventive medicine. He wrote me a letter, which we discussed, when doctors cure all the disease, then they'll have time to prevent disease. And I think that made a very important role on me, and I've always been a big believer in preventive medicine and the mind-body relationship, that you have to have the right spirit, you have to have the right attitude in order to heal. One of the most interesting discussions we had, and we had it multiple times actually, was a discussion of the difference between biological age and chronological age. Chronological age being the number of years that someone's been on the earth from the day they were born to the current. Biological age was something a little more difficult. Biological age was really how the body responded in terms of the age of the cells, and also the mind, of how the mind responded. So biological age was more of how well the person was, what they thought, etc. And he made a very important point, that it's not the number of years that one lives on the earth, the sort of chronological age, but it's the biological age that's important. I think the Rebbe was a good example I remember one Farbringen, I don't know if it was his 80th birthday, where I was a little, not concerned, but it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So we did initially try to restrict the time, but the Rebbe told us that he wanted to do it, and he would have these Farbringen. I went to Farbringens, and one of the most interesting things is he would see me in the audience there, and he would hold up his hand and hold his pulse and nod his head that things were fine. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, we finished the Farbringen, and he stood there handing Tanya's out to everybody, including myself.
Okay. So what was it like to be the Rebbe's doctor?
It's quite interesting. I had not known much about the Rebbe before, and we developed a team of doctors. And for several months, I would go down there every day to see him. He happened to be a reasonably good patient, although other members of the Hasidic community didn't always trust what we did, and they wanted second, third, and fourth, and fifth opinions of doctors and rabbis. But it was quite an experience, and I learned a lot.
Now, let's walk through how you wound up being the person who was called for this, right? So so you're born, and eventually you reach the age at which you acknowledge that a Jewish child is a valid life form, which, as we know, is graduation from medical school. So what, you shared with me a little bit, but like, when did you know medicine was what you were going to do, and and cardiology specifically?
Believe it or not, at age 3, I was destined to be a cardiologist. My father was an internist and the cardiologist at the time when there weren't really cardiologists. And I remember I have a picture of a stethoscope in my ears listening to his heart at age 3, and always wanted to be a cardiologist, basically. So in high school, and then I went to college and then medical school and training. And that's what I've been my whole life. So it started early. There's the picture. There's the picture of me listening to the heart there. So it was, I was destined to be at an early age a cardiologist.
And
And
where
it's
is
been
this?
a great career. And in the last year, I retired as chief of cardiology at Hackensack and been spending more of my time teaching young medical students, not just cardiology, but medicine in general, and how to deal with the patients and develop that patient-doctor relationship, which I think is very important.
That's something that I want to hear you say more about in a little bit, because when I did my chaplaincy circuit in a hospital, I felt like one of the jobs of the chaplain is often running interference between patients, and I was at a children's hospital, so it was parents of the patients who were the kids who would hear something from the doctor that would set them off in a very negative way, and the doctor would not be able to understand how that information could have been a negative experience. And I felt like that was often when the chaplain was shoved into the room. But where is this picture taken?
This was taken actually, my father was in the military at the time. It was either at Fort Sam Houston or in the Carolinas.
How much did you travel around as a kid with the military situation?
Only early on, I was born in 1942, and we traveled a little bit. My father never left the country. He was stationed at Fort Sam Houston, and so I didn't do a lot of traveling at that point. And we moved back to Passaic, New Jersey, where I grew up, went to high school, and lived.
And what was your college trajectory like? Back to back to back? Where'd you go?
Okay. I went to Passaic High School, and from Passaic High School, I went to Harvard up in Cambridge, and I was at Harvard for 4 years, and I then went to Harvard Medical School for 4 years, so I spent 8 years in Boston, and then did my house staff training in Boston, and then I spent during the Korean War era I spent 2 years at the National Institutes of Health, where I did research and actually met the gentleman who's on the President's Committee, the head of the infectious disease at the time. We were all young guys then. And after the NIH, I went back to Boston, did more training, and then someone said, "You're never going to leave Boston." But I did, and I came to New York in 1974, and actually joined Temple Shalom in 1974, and been a member since, and lived in Oradell ever since. Originally, I went to Mount Sinai and spent many years at Sinai, and then was recruited in 1996 to come to Hackensack University Medical Center as the chief of cardiology. And I also ran a complementary medicine program, so I feel that there's a lot with the mind and the body. And then in the last year or so, I've retired from that, but I've been very active in teaching. And your point is well taken, Rabbi, is we have to teach the young doctors not just the science of medicine, but how to deal with patients and how to have empathy and how to develop the relationship with the patients and their family.
You know, I just want to say on behalf of all of us that we're a little disappointed that you couldn't have achieved a little bit more in your time so far on Earth, because I really feel like you're just scratching the surface of your potential here. And I am, of course, being completely facetious, because it is incredible. I mean, you have this incredible professional career that is, for many of us, myself included, from the education all the way through everything that you just described, just like absolutely mind-blowing in terms of the opportunities and successes, and I'm sure the failures that were along that path. And I wanted to ask you, what was the balance like over the years in terms of, and I don't even know if I'm asking the question correctly, but actual medical practice, you know, in the room, so to speak, versus medical management that I would assume would come to a greater degree as you move through the ranks into the directorship of a program. You know, like, did you ever get to a time where you felt like you weren't spending enough time doing direct patient work or too much time researching?
And that's a very good question. You know, my career was teaching, research, and patient care. Patient care always came first, and I still believe it should, so that even in all the years, I never gave up a practice, an active practice. I never gave up making rounds, seeing patients. And I think you raised an interesting point. The physician has to treat not only the patient, but the family of the patient as well. And I think I learned some of that from the Rebbes in terms of how the physician's role is to heal. But it's a partnership. And I think that's what I try to teach the medical students, that it is a partnership. And I'm afraid, and I don't want to be pejorative of my own profession, but some doctors have lost that or never had it in terms of the importance of dealing with the patient. Someone once said, Osler, I think it was, cure the disease and heal the patient. So I think that's something, and something that Judaism actually has in it, and something that the Rebbe helped to instill in me is the totality, not just the disease, not just the organ, but treating a person as an individual, as a human being.
So to move away from the medical into the Jewish for a little bit, you know, because Judaism is something that you are also so committed to and well-versed in. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your Jewish family background and Jewish identity, and where you were in your own Jewish identity sort of when you first met the Rebbe, because you were coming in not as one of the insiders of the, you know, of that specific sect necessarily. And, you know, did that experience shift, alter, change, expand, narrow your Jewish identity?
That's a very good question. I was born in a conservative household. We went to temple. We were kosher at home. And what happened is, over time, I was bar mitzvahed, and I was very interested. In fact, after I was bar mitzvahed, I actually ran the Musaf service in the bar mitzvah boys that we had. So I always retained my ties to Judaism. And at Harvard, I was active in Hillel. So it's always been part of my life. And then when we moved up here, we actually joined a Reform congregation. And I've kept active. It's interesting that I have kept up with Jewish medical ethics and things like that, and been involved in that regard as well. I think that religion has to play an important role in your life. And I think different people, I took care of the Rebbe. I did not become Orthodox. I felt that the kind of religion I am practicing is appropriate. It's interesting. The Rebbe, when my mother died, sent his secretariat, he's ultra-Orthodox, to my shiva.
Wow.
So we developed, my thing with the Rebbe was not only religious, but was a personal relationship. I do not support all of the Hasidic points of view and what they do. And I think it's interesting. What's happened is there's been no replacement for the Rebbe over the years, because he was a very special individual. And I think the community has changed and suffered in that regard, because he was a charismatic leader, independent of anything else. So I retain my Judaism. I am very interested in Jewish mysticism in terms of background, and still read interesting things about the red ribbon and the Chamsa and things like that.
For any question that I ask, you can take a pass, but I am extra giving you a pass for this one because I wouldn't want to have to answer it if I was in your position. But I'm going to ask the question that is going to be on a lot of people's minds. Because you had a unique insight of working in a medical capacity with the ultra-Orthodox community, do you have an opinion that you would like to share about seeing that same community, not as a whole, but in certain groups, completely disregard these social distancing mandates during this crisis?
That's a very important question that I've thought about in different ways, even before this current epidemic. In my relationship with the Hasidic community, and I still have patients from them, and I still maintain contacts. There are things that I really respected in terms of their Judaism, but there are also the cultish things and certain things that I did not respect in terms of how they treated women and how they treated other people, and their sort of disregard, perhaps, for secular laws and things like that. Without going into detail, been involved in some legal proceedings that they were involved with, and they didn't cooperate. So I do support a lot of the basic concepts of the Judaism, but I must admit, as you pointed out, and I'm willing to answer, I do not support it's a cult. And there are cult aspects of it that I think are not appropriate. And in this new virus epidemic, breaking the law and going with the lack of social distancing and things like that, I found important.
Yeah, and to your comment that there has not been a replacement for Rabbi Schneerson, there is no that single voice that could have put a stop to this with one word is not there.
That is correct. I don't know if most of you know that he grew up in Russia. He spent time in Paris at the Sorbonne. He had a PhD in engineering from the Sorbonne.
I knew he studied there, but I didn't know that it was in that field.
Yes, and he was, he knew a lot about a lot of different things that had nothing to do with Orthodox religion. We discussed desalination plants in Israel. I stayed away from the politics with him, generally. I think he stayed away from the politics, but he had a lot of followers who, I don't know if it's appropriate to raise the question. I'm not going to give an answer as whether he was the Mashiach.
Right.
That was always a question that came up, of whether he thought he was or whether he was the Mashiach, which has not been answered, the Messiah. And he never, he never told me the right answer.
Yeah, I'll definitely leave that there because that's a debate that we could go on with for several days. I'm going to change the subject relatively drastically. But before I do, and what I want to do is I want to walk through some of these incredible pictures that we have of you. I have two other questions. Number one, would you please introduce us to the owl behind your left shoulder?
Oh, Hedwig. Everyone know who Hedwig is? I'm not going to say. I'm going to use it as a. I don't know. You don't have. People should go to the chat room, or we can poll people if they can raise their hands. How many people know who Hedwig is? The owl. You saw the owl across my shoulder.
Well, here's
a picture of me Halloween. Some of you may recognize my alma mater there.
Yeah, the
yes.
picture of you in full Hogwarts regalia makes me.
Full Hogwarts. We're using Zoom for the medical school. I'm still trying to figure out how to make the picture of Hogwarts as the background versus the bookshelves. But I haven't figured that out. No, I am interested in Harry Potter for many reasons. One, I think it's a wonderful series for kids to read. Two is what some of you may or may not know is I'm a board certified magician. So that's the second thing.
With you in action. Let me scroll to it here.
Oops, there I am.
I want the one with you in the cape.
Here is it.
There we go.
I've done magic shows for children there at Mount Sinai, and I've done adult shows, and I'm in costume there. In fact, I'm going to do Zoom is very hard to do magic on Zoom, but I'm doing a show next Friday for the faculty.
I was going to ask you, do you have a trick ready to go?
Do I have a trick ready to go? I always have a trick. I carry a magic ring, okay? And if you look into the magic ring and blow into the magic ring, out of the magic ring, if I can do it, will come, in this case, an Israeli flag.
Oh, very nice.
Any magician can do that. The hard part is to stuff it back into the ring and make it totally disappear.
You're not supposed to. That's how it works.
It's very hard to do magic on Zoom. I'll do one more. I don't want to waste. Everyone see the color is green and yellow. If you watch very carefully, it changes to red and blue.
Excellent.
So I'll stop with my magic. I also do card tricks. You know why I do card tricks?
No.
Because I'm a cardiologist.
Oh my God. I'm going to leave the room now.
My stage name actually is Ludini.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love puns.
It's hard for magicians to do magic tricks on Zoom. I have a picture, though, of a magician, and I don't know if you can all see it, trying to make a rabbit appear using the TV instead of the hat.
Absolutely.
So we have lots of issues. And it's interesting, magic is a vanishing art, but it's a way of interacting with people, and it's a way of interacting even with patients, especially children, in terms of developing a relationship. I believe very strongly in that patient-doctor relationship, and I think magic can help.
Oh, yeah. I had an internship and when I was in school at a congregation that was like almost everybody at that congregation was in the medical profession because that was the employment that brought people to that area. And I walked in with, I could not speak medicalese whatsoever at all. And they really hoped that my summer as a chaplain in the hospital would help in that regard, but it didn't because I just never picked up more than the human stuff. And so the details of the medical jargon and everything else, at least I married someone who speaks it. But seeing, I feel like magic is a place hospitals are a place that magic is seen frequently. And it's not only in the miraculous work by the healthcare professionals, but it's in the work of the support staff that are going in, musicians, musicologists, et cetera, family care workers who go in.
You're absolutely right. It's a team approach. And it's not just the physicians, it's everyone approaching the patient, both medical personnel and non-medical personnel. I used to be very active in a corporation called Plaintree. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Plaintree. And the goal was to make hospitals not look like hospitals. Mm-hmm. And that would help the healing process and make sure people have windows to look out of. And You know, if you go even into Hackensack, you see that our main lobby looks more like a living room, and that's intentional. And bringing music, bringing a violinist to the bedside, a lot of these things help the healing process and take away that picture of a hospital purely as a intensive care area.
How much have you seen that change over your career?
I saw it change a fair amount, and then it sort of got stuck. And I haven't seen much change recently. I think the technology, although technology is very good, don't get me wrong, has put a sort of a damper on that. I mean, the buildings that we build are very functional, but they need to be very personal. And I think at Hackensack, those who've been there, and I'm not trying to say it's the only place, but you look at our children's hospital and you look at our cancer center, we've done a lot of things to try to make it less of a glass and steel enclosure. And I think that's important for healing. And I think I learned that also from the Rebbes and from, the initial readings, that you can't just heal the body, you have to heal the total person.
Right. I want to invite anybody at this point to, if you have questions, to start typing them into the chat box. I wanted to ask you next, Lou, you've had some significant inventions that you've been a part of that have entered into medical practice. And I'm not even going to attempt to say what those procedures are or are for, because I'll get it wrong and I'd rather you say it. So what led you to some of the cardio-related procedures? What led you to develop them? How did that work? What was the process like?
Well, I've been very lucky. I have actually, I'll brag a little bit. I have a formula widely used in the world in echo named after me called the Teichholz formula. And if you go on the internet, you can type that in. I was always very interested in different things. I had a mentor up in Boston by the name of Dick Gorlin, and he introduced me to somebody who was not a cardiologist, not a physician, was involved in ultrasound. And I got interested, and it was before there were anything real, and we helped to develop some of the early ultrasound. So you have to have an intellectual curiosity, and you have to have people who can interact with each other, not necessarily physicians. And over the years, I felt that we should be doing things to help the care of the patient. Now, I was a non-invasive cardiologist. I didn't do the fancy procedures. I was heavily involved with diagnosis, and still am in teaching history and physical examination to our medical students, which I think is the cornerstone. And that's also been something that I've been involved with over the years. And it is a problem. I'll tell you, we have a problem with the temple and going and praying and this and that. We have a problem teaching the medical students how to examine patients.
Right.
Because of the physical contact. We can teach them how to take histories, but it's much harder to do the physical examination. And that's part of the process.
To build off of that, when we think about, you mentioned your work as a diagnostician, and I have heard at least Eileen compare you to House from the show House, which I only know that House is a diagnostician because Charlotte is currently watching that. And also because I used to homestay with a couple doctors who their idea of a night in is they would watch episodes of House and take a drink every time they saw an instance of malpractice. Amazing. Okay, perfect. So having had that be such a huge and defining aspect of your work, how do you see that happening now? And I'll point to what Nylene said in the chat box. So if right now people are having to figure out how to do medicine not face-to-face, including diagnosing, will that stay? Will that change? Do you think that we will keep some of the health distance stuff that is mandated right now when we get back to a so-called normal?
Well, even before this, we started working with telemedicine in terms of being able to talk to people from afar. And I think that's going to go forward and probably going to be enhanced because of this. I have to tell you, it's not new. At the Mass General Hospital, when I was an intern, there was telemedicine. There were nurses at Logan Airport with a TV camera and a microphone, and they used to interview patients and go send it back to Massachusetts General Hospital. But I think it has changed a lot in a way that people, what they should expect. I think that things, hopefully, if we've trained the physicians right, when this pandemic sort of clears, we'll go back to a more normal type of thing where there's more of the relationship. I'm enthusiastic that this is only a temporary thing. How temporary, I don't know, but I'm enthusiastic that we should be able to go back to the proper things.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions before we sort of wrap up here. Number one is, actually, I'm going to ask you both questions so that you can think about the second one. The first one is, what are you personally the most proud of in terms of your professional work? Like, what's the part that you hold the nearest and dearest? And then the second question is, do you have a favorite anecdote from your work that brings a smile to your face every time that you share it, and would you share it with us? So what of your professional accolades, what are the couple of things that you are personally the most proud of and hold dear? And then do you have a favorite anecdote that you could tell?
The first one I think I can answer reasonably well. What I enjoy is the relationship with the patient, and I enjoyed, as I retired, my patients writing me letters, calling me, telling them about the relationship, and hoping that they would be able to find a doctor who would do the same thing. So I think that's been something that's been very, very nice to get recognition, although you don't need it, for what I think is what a good physician should do.
May I just say that I can count on one finger of one hand, and I'm referring to you, the number of medical professionals who have had such significant professional achievements that would actually give the answer of my relationships with other human beings and the things that I cherish the most about my professional career. I personally find that outstandingly moving.
Well, I appreciate that, although I think that really is one of the most important things. Why does one become a doctor?
Exactly.
You know, I don't think one becomes a doctor. I mean, there are a lot of reasons. People become doctor because they want to make money. They become a doctor because X, Y, and Z. But I really believe that in the past, you became a doctor because you wanted to help people. And I think and the Rebbe, it reinforced that. A specific antidote, I'm not sure I can say other than the thank yous I've had from my patients after I retired. You know, the biggest thing that I remember, as you saw in the video, is the Rebbe's view about preventive medicine and the importance of that. And I think that's something I've learned over the years in terms of dealing with patients. You have to deal with the total patient, and you have to deal with the family. So I don't have a specific story that I would give per se.
All right, now lightning round. I want to go through some of these amazing pictures that we might not have seen yet. Now, these are in no particular order. So there's you as a musician. Here's something.
I love my family. That's my family. That's 2 summers ago when we went on safari in South Africa.
Beautiful. And any of us want to do is get together with our families like that. So it's very heartwarming to see that picture, but also with envy that you and us, we all look to have that large family moment again.
I think family is important, and in Judaism, family is important. That's a picture of me with a bow tie, 1970, and that's at the Peter Ben Brigham Hospital. In the middle is my mentor, Dick Orlin, and these are various other doctors. But that's me early on in my career.
How early did you commit to the bow tie?
Yep.
But
early on, before anyone else did.
There's you and
That's me and my father, who was my inspiration to be a doctor. That's Harry Potter. That's my wedding. That's my wonderful, beautiful wife, Susan. And that's me when I was young.
Where did you have your wedding?
We were married here in New Jersey in Short Hills. We were married actually by a Reform rabbi and an Orthodox rabbi.
Oh, an intermarriage.
An intermarriage.
Right.
That's a very nice letter which the Rebbe sent me. The important thing on that is the middle paragraph. He says the essential thing is the deed. To you as a physician, there is no need to emphasize the practicality of this. So again, I learned a lot from him. I was very happy when he wrote in here somewhere, here it is, the last paragraph. Once again, many thanks for your special attention, both professionally and as a friend. So I was very happy for that total relationship. So I learned a lot, and it really made a good difference, and it fostered my continued interest in Judaism and in reading more about various of the history of it. We were just in Israel this past period of time for my grandson's bar mitzvah, and we went to Safed, and we saw all the old synagogues and the
beautiful
things.
Awesome. So that takes us through it. Let me see. Oh, yes.
That's Israel.
That's Israel.
That's my wife in the red, and that's me, and that's the rabbi, and that's my grandson Chase, who had his bar mitzvah in Israel. We were inside because it was pouring outside. It was supposed to be at the Western Wall, but it was inside, which actually turned out to be very nice.
That's great. Yeah, no one wants to be on the way to their or their family members' b'nai mitzvah and then like slip and fall on a slick cobblestone in Jerusalem, going up or downhill.
That's just a picture of me at the hospital.
With the bow tie.
With the bow tie, always. And that bow tie has, I think, stethoscopes on it. That's a picture of me at some function with my lovely wife, Susan. There, it's a long tie. You see, when I go to formal, I wear a long tie.
So
This is graduation from medical school.
So you committed to the bow tie very early. When did you commit to the signature curly mustache? Was that when you decided to be a magician because you knew magicians need to have interesting facial hair, or did it naturally develop separately?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'd have to go back to see when I had the mustache. It was sometime after I arrived at Hackensack, and I don't think I had it at Mount Sinai.
Well, I think it gives you great character, and for all of us who are facially hair challenged, very well done, sir.
Well, I'm happy, and I'm happy to have you and the Cantor. I think it's important for us all to work together in this difficult time, to not only heal the body, but heal the soul, and work together with music and with prayer to try to get over this hard time. It's going to be a hard time. I don't remember anything in medicine that I experienced since I was not alive in the pandemic in 1918, anything that I experienced, I remember as a kid with the polio, where I went to camp and they didn't allow visiting hours and all sorts of things. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to take time, but I think we all have to have the resolve to get through this. It's difficult, but I think we'll be stronger afterwards.
Thank you so much. You gave the perfect closing. I literally have nothing to add other than a huge thank you. I'm going to cancel the spotlight so that people can go back to gallery view and see everyone's faces if you wish. I am in a moment going to take everyone off mute for a very cacophonous round of thank yous. But just one last question. Doctor, I've got a slight pain right here, and I was just wondering if you could give me a quick example of your diagnostic digital skill. No, I'm just kidding, obviously.
Call 911. Wait a minute. Call 911. No.
Okay. So again, thank you so much. And I'm going to take everybody off mute now to share your thanks. This was truly incredibly special.